thank you for being here, and thank you for bringing the collegian. We'll see if anybody drifts in. My name is Mona Field. I'm with the League of Women Voters of Greater LA. And thanks to Professor Camille, we've been partners for a while with LACC. I don't know if you know, last spring there was a forum for the city attorney position right here on campus. And hopefully there'll be one for the two people in the final election. But let me tell you briefly about the League and then about what's on the ballot. So first of all, it's called the League of Women Voters, but it's for everybody. Everybody is welcome. The name is a product of our history, that it was founded in 1920. And at that time, women had just gotten the right to vote, so there was a need for a League of Women Voters. Now, of course, we are for everyone and we welcome everyone, and we still have the same general purpose, which is educate voters. The other thing is we're nonpartisan, so we never ever endorse a candidate. We never support a party. What we do is we have positions on issues, and we try to help people understand the propositions, the things where there's a pro and a con, but it's not, directly a party or partisan issue. So I just want to say, just for the record, I'm going to pretend there's a few other people here because it makes it a little easier, but if by any chance you've moved since the last time you voted, you need to double check your registration, because the post office does not forward voter materials. So if you want to get your ballot and vote at home and mail it, which lots of us do, you do need to be sure your current address. And the website, which one? The bottom one, lavote.net, that's LA County, and that's the one where you can go to the Register of Voters page on that website, and you put in your name and address, and they tell you either, oh yes, that's your current voter registration, or no, your address that you just put in doesn't match, and then you re-register right there. So keep in mind anybody you know who may have moved, and remember, like if I say to you, when was the last election? What would jump into your head? Feel free, guys, just shout it out.
There was like one a few months back, like a local one.
Oh, okay, well there was the primary
Yes.
last spring, correct. So if you've moved since then, you have to work on that change. And so if you know people who may have moved over the summer, for example, have them check and make sure they're registered at the current address. As we know, here in California, we have what's called direct democracy, meaning the voters directly can amend the state constitution or change laws, and that's what those propositions are about. So this year, actually, it's kind of interesting. You both got the little handout, right? This year, there are fewer state propositions than there have been, I think, almost in the history since we started having propositions, which was 1911. So basically, we have fewer than we used to, which is kind of good, less work for voters. And the way I like to just share them, I don't go exactly in numerical order. You'll see why, because some are really more complicated and harder to understand, and others are pretty much more simple. So starting with Prop 1, and you'll see on the sheet, it says, and by the way, this sheet is a piece of what's there if you go to easyvoterguide.org. That is produced by the League of Women Voters of California, and due to all the usual concerns about paper and ink, and we didn't print the entire thing. Professor Camille did print the essential pages for today, but there's a little more there about general information, but it's that link is available so you can see the whole document. Anyway, Prop 1 is a legislative constitutional amendment. What that means is it was put on the ballot by the legislators in Sacramento. It was not signature gathering. And I'm guessing everyone's familiar with walking into a grocery store and someone saying, oh, would you sign, help end all war, or let's have, world peace, or whatever it is, some globally positive goal, and they want you to sign. This one is not like that. This one is the people who we elected to go to Sacramento and make our laws and our budget as a state, they put it on, and it's a constitutional amendment, and the whole point of it, it's very simple. We in California currently have a fairly high level of what this calls reproductive freedom, basically the right to have an abortion, right? And our current law would not change. It still would have, there is sort of a deadline. You can't have an abortion after 24 weeks. And that's very rare, obviously. That would be a very unusual case, an abortion that late in a pregnancy. But in any case, it would simply take the current abortion rights and put them in the Constitution. Because right now they're a law, but the fear is, and I will explain what's behind this, some of you may be really familiar, is that and I will sound like I'm partisan, but I'm being factual, that if the Republican Party takes the majority in the Congress in Washington, there is some concern that they would try, now that the Supreme Court has gotten rid of a national protection, the Roe versus Wade, that there would be some effort by Republicans to actually make abortion illegal everywhere. Right now it's a whole patchwork, right? California has pretty strong reproductive choice laws. Some states have recently decided no abortion. So putting it in our state constitution, it's kind of a way to make it a little more clear what California's goal is around this option, right? No one will be forced to have an abortion, but women who want one would have the right under the Constitution. So the yes vote is put it in the Constitution, and the no vote would be just leave it as it is, a law. Okay, and by the way, if people have questions, I will, at the end maybe, feel free to make a note and say, this is what I want to ask about. I just want to make sure we cover things. I'm going to jump past the most complicated, which is 26 and 27. We'll come back, don't worry, and go to Prop 28. Now, Prop 28, it's actually one of the simpler ones that we've seen for quite a while. This is initiative statute, meaning it's to make a law. It's not a constitutional amendment to our state constitution. It's just a law. And it was put there by signature gathering initiative. And what that means, by the way, when we see, it's not as cold in here as you said it might be, so. Or will it fluctuate?
It fluctuates. At night it gets very cold in here.
Okay, well, I brought variations of layers. So, Prop 28 was put there, and when I say it's an initiative statute, meaning all the signatures had to be gathered, they had to be verified, costs a couple $1 million. So we know there's money behind any kind of initiative statute or even an initiative constitutional amendment. And this one for the funding arts and music, there's no tax increase, which right away reduces opposition. It simply says that of whatever's in the state budget, 1% every year will go to arts education in our K-12 public schools. Now, it doesn't include community college. It is K-12. And the couple $1 million was spent primarily by a gentleman named Austin Buettner. That name could be familiar. He's been active in LA a long time, civic leader kind of person. And then for several years, he was the superintendent of the LA Unified School District. And my understanding is that during the 3 years, that's when he realized, oh my goodness, we are really underfunding arts, music, every kind of art, every possible kind. So he put this on the ballot, with his money, paying people to get signatures. And what's really interesting about this one is, even though you could say, well, we don't want to tie down the state budget. What if it's a bad year on wildfire? But what's interesting, and you'll note this when you get your official ballot sample from the state in about 2 weeks or so. Welcome.
Come on in.
There's no official opposition to Prop 28. There is nobody signing on that sample ballot as we don't like it. And what's interesting, if I may say, you know, the two parties take positions on everything. So Democrats favor it, Republicans are neutral, which is really interesting because the state Republican Party, in terms of all of this year's initiatives, they oppose all of them except they're neutral on 28, which is kind of interesting because I think it's kind of rare. There's literally no official opponents to Prop 28. So, and if you vote yes, you want to see that little percent set aside so that the school programs will really enable all K-12 public students to have, you know, a much, much more robust opportunity to study the arts. So that's one that I consider pretty easy to understand. Now, number 29, this is also signature gathering, several $1 million to get it in front of all of us. And if any of you voted either in 2020 in the fall or 2018 in the fall, by the way, all our state initiatives happen in the November elections. They used to happen both sometimes in the primary season in the spring and in November. Now it's only November, which sometimes means they can be piled up and there can be way more than we have this year. I think, personally, I don't think there's any partisan bias if I say that we should all be grateful there's as few as there are this time. But 29 should look familiar because you voted on it before. Kidney dialysis clinic requirements, and people will say, well, if we've already voted on it, why is it here? Well, we, you, us, all of us, voters, we rejected it twice. Basically the exact same thing. We've said no twice by majority vote. So you might say, so who's spending millions of dollars to get it on the ballot again? So in this case, before I describe, quote, what it would do, I just want to tell you who the money players are, because that sometimes can illuminate the issue. So in this case, the money behind in favor of Prop 29 is primarily a large union called the Service Employees International Union, SEIU. And SEIU would like to unionize the healthcare professionals who work at these clinics. The clinics, for the most part, by the way, and this is for people who need dialysis, this is like serious medical stuff, you need it. If you need it, you need it. For the most part, these clinics are for-profit. They are not a non-profit, you know, help people get healthy. It's for-profit. There's two major corporations that run them in California. One is DaVita and one is Fresenius. And you know, when you're driving around, you might sometimes see a building that says DaVita, but it doesn't really say what they do there. Or it's a Fresenius, they even hide it more, I think. But anyway, they're very profitable corporations, and the union basically, in order to kind of shake up these corporations, this is now their third time putting it on the ballot, and it would require, the major change is that they would have to have a doctor on premises at all times. Now, right now, when people go for dialysis, there's nurses and there's LVNs and there's technology, you know, health tech and all that. But a doctor isn't literally there all day or whenever they're doing the dialysis service. This would require that. And it's a little early probably to start seeing all the pro and con advertising, but what you'll end up seeing is the battle of the union money. And of course they don't come out and say, this is the union, we're trying to get the voters to help us negotiate or, you know, unionize people. It'll say, I'm a dialysis patient, I feel Prop 29 would help me get better care. And then on the no side, you won't see we're the corporations who are making money off this, even though they're paying for the ads. You'll see, I'm a dialysis patient and I'm so scared that if this passes, my clinic might close because the costs would go up if there has to be a doctor all the time. So you'll see the patients fight it out in the advertising. But it's good to know who's behind it in terms of the finances on the pro and con. And again, this you know, this is a very short summary, and you'll have more details. Oh, let me mention, the website that says, CAVotes, cavotes.org, that's where you can get a more detailed but unbiased from the League of Women Voters pro and con. So that's also a recommended place to learn more. So again, if you vote yes on 29, you would like to see doctors on staff all times and a few other rules for the clinics. If you vote no, you're saying leave it as it is. Where the doctor, by the way, oversees the patient. Their own doctor checks on them, I think it's monthly at least, but the doctor isn't necessarily there in person when they have their treatment. Okay, here's another one that's kind of fun to analyze based on the money and who's behind it, and that's Prop 30. Now, the way it's phrased here on this little, it's like a cheat sheet. It's, you know, do they still have Cliff Notes, or is that really? Cliff Notes?
I don't know, and maybe they do.
Well, Cliff Notes, when I was a student, was kind of the way you could get a really short summary of what you needed to learn. That's what this is, right? So they call it income tax on millionaires for electric cars. And again, initiative statute, meaning somebody needed a couple $1 million just to get it on the ballot, to gather the signatures. And we'll talk about that somebody in a moment. Now, if you were to ask, I think most Californians, not everyone, you know, we're big on the environment here, right? Our state has made big commitments to get us into electric cars, to have more public transportation, to clean up the air. I mean, our state is kind of a leader on that. So Prop 30, you know, who could oppose making sure we have more electric cars, right? It sounds so fairly non-issue, but there's a lot of questions there. First of all, taxing millionaires. So what it would do, Prop 30, if you earn over $2 million per year annual income, and if anyone's in that category, I'm going to ask you, what are you doing here today? But anyway, meaning you have many other ways to spend your time if you earn that much. But anyway, it would add to their current taxes, which are pretty high. California tends to tax the rich for any old thing. We've done it a bunch of times through these initiatives for a variety of good reasons, mental health care and, you know, assorted things. So this would add another 1.75%, almost 2%, on the people who earn that much. And the idea is it would help us expand the infrastructure, you know, the charging stations that we need, and help people get the rebates and have electric cars and so on. But let's hear about who's behind it, because that sometimes impacts our decision. First of all, when you see your sample ballot, you'll see that the pro side is signed Coalition of Clean Air, the, you know, Cancer Network. I mean, groups that obviously care about the quality of air and our health, and the environmental groups, they'll all sign it. But the money is coming from Lyft. Lyft, the rideshare company, because Lyft has a mandate, again, from our state lawmakers that they have to get all their drivers in electric cars in fairly short time, I think 2030. It's pretty quick deadline. And so Lyft, in looking at that mandate for electric cars for their many, many, I don't know how many tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Lyft drivers in California, they said, well, maybe we can get a different way to pay for it, not out of Lyft profits, but tax on millionaires. So they paid to put this on the ballot, and the Yes advertising, again, the ad will show you somebody talking about the importance of clean air and transitioning away from fossil fuels, but the money behind the ad will be Lyft. And then on the no side, what's interesting is, of course, the traditional anti-tax groups, there's something maybe you've heard of called Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association. It's been around for 40 some years. And it's a long story about why it's named for a particular person named Howard Jarvis, and probably Professor Camille and I are the only people old enough to know, but sometime we'll tell you the story. But anyway, they'll oppose this because of the higher tax, even if it's on very wealthy people, they'll just oppose tax increases. But what's really interesting is that the other very well-known individual who's coming out and I believe is actually going to make ads against Prop 30 is Governor Newsom.
You know, they're already.
Are they already on?
Yeah, they're already
Okay,
on.
okay. I don't watch TV, so I miss a whole lot of not very important junk advertising, but anyway. So Governor Newsom has basically publicly said, Lyft is, well, he didn't quite call it a scam. I think he said it's a scheme. And he's basically saying, you know, they don't want to pay for it themselves. They're trying to foist it onto these wealthy taxpayers. And he's very openly against it. And it's very interesting because there he is lined up with the Republican Party, which kind of odd, and the anti-tax people. And so, you know, there you have it. It's going to be really interesting to see what voters do, I think, with 30. And the California Democratic Party is a yes, the Republican Party is a no. They will naturally advise their members, people who are members of the party, what the party believes they should do. So Prop 30, you know, I would say one way to think about it, this is kind of my own little thinking, it's not necessary, but look at the goal and look at who's for and against, and then decide where the trade-offs are, because, you know, I think for the most part, the goal, most Californians support the concept, although I will say on the no side, there are some interesting arguments about, hey, what happens on a real hot day with all these electric cars that need to be plugged in? And the grid, we all know about that. We've recently been real worried about our electricity on hot days. And then, of course, the people who favor it say, oh, no, all those electric cars can actually reverse and have power in them and put it back into the grid. And honestly, I don't know the technology, so I can't speak to those arguments. Okay, so Prop 30, tax the rich, $2 million or more a year income for the electrification of our vehicles and so forth. And then 31 is another kind of proposition I want to explain. And it says here, referendum. Just for fun, and I know nobody teaches California government as a separate class anymore, which I love teaching, I must say. Just so you all know, I used to teach at Glendale College for many years. So, and this was my specialty. And we actually had a whole little 6-week class so you could know how California works, but I think it's all gone. Anyway, 31 is a referendum. Anybody know what a referendum is and why it's a little different than the ones we've been talking about? No? It's okay if you don't. Nobody teaches you, so. I'm sure Professor Camille knows, but.
Yes, I cover it for about 2 minutes.
Oh, well, but she's a law professor, right? I taught political science. So. The point is, referendum is a really interesting thing. So what has happened here? A couple years ago, the lawmakers in Sacramento, our state Senate, state assembly, went and passed a law to outlaw flavored tobacco. The law was called Senate Bill 793, okay? Now, that bill never went into effect. You might say, well, what? They passed it, the governor signed it, but what happened? Well, certain organizations, of course we'll momentarily tell you who if you haven't figured it out, they did not want a restriction on the sale of flavored tobacco products in California. And they went and started gathering signatures, again, a couple $1 million, to get a referendum on the ballot. And what the referendum means is we voters are going to decide whether that law goes into effect or not. And I'm going to ask, because you don't need to have a poli-sci major to figure this out, which types of special interest groups do you think went right away when that law went through and got signed by the governor and start gathering signatures to see if the voters would overturn it? A wild guess, who does not want restriction on forms of tobacco?
The major tobacco companies.
There you go. Is it J.R. Reynolds or R.J. Reynolds? R.J. Reynolds. And what's the other big one? Philip Morris. If you look at where the money is on this, it's that. It's the tobacco interest. Now, again, if you see ads, here's the funny trick. On a referendum, if you vote yes, you're saying, I want the law to take effect. I'd like restrictions on flavored tobacco. And by the way, the primary argument is that the flavored tobaccos are used to draw younger people into addiction to tobacco. That's the issue. And that's why the legislature passed it and the governor signed it because, you know, in terms of future health, I think we all know tobacco is not the safest substance, whether it's flavored or not. So, so if you vote yes, you're saying, I want these restrictions. If you vote no on Prop 31, you're saying, I don't want that law to happen. And it's very confusing. So when you see the ads from the tobacco industry, they're going to be no on 31. No on 31. And they'll say things like, prohibition never works. You know, if we make it illegal, they'll just, you know, come in underground from Arizona, which there could be some truth to that. They'll give a bunch of arguments. They will not say in order to sustain corporate profits, we want every possible form of tobacco to be available in California. They're not going to say that, right? They're going to talk about, you know, our freedom and prohibition doesn't work and things like that. So if you see the no on 31 ads, I think that'll be the theme. And then in the tiny print, they still do this, right? If you've seen it in tiny, tiny print, it says who's paying for it. But it's gone before you can even see it practically, right?
Well, actually, I think that it's a little bit more viewable now.
Visible?
Yeah, I actually noticed that in the advertising this year, that you did actually have time to kind of see the names underneath it. And
Who's
stuff.
paying?
There must have been a change in the
Yes.
regulation.
Yeah. No, and by the way, in California, just as we are a state that, contrary to some states you've read about and heard about, we're a voter encouragement state. We're not a voter suppression state, right? You've heard about voter suppression where they're trying to discourage people from voting. We make it easy. We mail you a ballot to your house. You can drop it in a mailbox or in a special box, which are all in libraries and parks all over the place. We want you to vote. And likewise, we want you to know who's paying for those ads that you see on TV. So more than other states, we do have requirements to show not just, you know, like there's so many phony baloney names for the groups that are pro or con, and especially when we get to 26 and 27, we'll see a lot of really not real things, but we are required in California to show who's really behind it financially. So anyway, so 31, the no side will be paid for by the tobacco industry almost entirely, and I can tell you where to find this out if you really want to dig deep, deep into the weeds of campaign finance information. And then the yes side is we really don't want these things sold. And by the way, I think the city of LA has already banned these things. I think our council, if you happen to live in the city of LA, has already banned flavored tobacco, but I could be wrong. I feel they certainly talked about it, but this would make it a statewide ban. So, you know, I'm going to stop for a moment because we have, what we have left, let me explain, is the two really most complicated state, and there are two for LA County, which aren't on this paper, but I can give you an overview of because we'll probably have time. But before we go to 26 and 27, were there any clarifications or questions about, you know, sort of what we talked about so far? I'm racing through it.
Mona, I have one question.
Yes.
On the issue about the electrical vehicles.
Oh, yes.
And it's a little attenuated from the measure, but is there a discussion about the environmental impact of, you know, all the lithium in the batteries and that sort of stuff associated with the electric vehicles
That is
as an issue?
such a good question, because creating an electric vehicle definitely, gosh, those lights are bothering me. It definitely requires very precious substances, metals, I don't even know what to call it, to create the batteries. And I don't know, I suspect if you dug really deep into the Prop 30 pro and con, there could be a mention of that. And that's a bigger issue too, is as we create electric vehicles, you know, each one of them represents some major minerals that are hard to get and that cause disruption just to get them out of the earth, right? So I think it's there somewhere in the detailed arguments. Anything else on anything before we look at 26 and 27? Rachel?
Yes, on 29, I was curious because it doesn't mention anything about like a tax increase. So where would the funds possibly be coming from if this was to be voted yes?
Okay, good question. The cost of, you know, having a doctor on site, which is the biggest change in terms of dollars, would fall on these corporations.
Okay.
And that's one reason, no doubt, that they're spending a ton of money to oppose it and defeat it, just as they did twice already, right? Same, DaVita and Fresenius, primary funders of the no on 29. And it does say here there's a modest change to the government, or charge, cost to the government. Now, when it says low tens of millions of dollars, we think, but that's a lot of money. Actually, for the state, it's kind of very little money. And that might be for enforcement.
Okay.
You know, like a bureaucracy to verify that these clinics are following the new laws. But most of the costs would fall, and that's why you'll see the ads, again, the no side funded by the two corporations is going to say, I'm a patient, I live in a rural area, and my clinic, if they can't afford to keep it going and they shut it, it's life-threatening. I mean, it's very emotional, the arguments on this one, you know, because you see patients presenting the two sides pretty much.
Isn't there a potential governmental cost because after 30 months, Medicare is the primary
That's,
fund paying for
yes.
dialysis?
Well,
Okay.
Medi-Cal for
Yeah.
low-income people and Medicare, yes. In that sense, there's government cost also. If the costs go up, the corporations tend not to truly absorb it. I mean, theoretically, right, they pay for it, but how do they get it back? They increase the cost, primarily paid by the insurance companies, which then all of us, our rates might go up, and or by government that provides subsidized care, Medicare or Medi-Cal. No, it's a good point. Again, these little cheat sheets here don't, you know, they don't dig very deep, but the one that's cavvotes.org will have a nice, much deeper dive into the pro and con and these kind of details.
I had another question on
Yeah.
Prop 31.
Yeah.
So this is one of the ones that we've touched on that's actually a referendum. How many times is a proposition allowed to go into referendum? Does it keep the same proposition number or does that change? And if we do decide to vote yes, does this have an opportunity to be on referendum again?
Okay. Yeah, and you asked several questions.
Yes.
I'll try and remember each piece of it.
Of course.
So it's really kind of, first of all, it's a one-time thing.
Okay.
If we vote yes, I'm pretty sure the law will go into effect and they won't come back. And I've never heard of that happening, by the way, where you come back, you know, you try to do a whole new referendum. I guess theoretically it could happen. But it would have a different number because, by the way, the numbering of propositions, this year, the Prop 1 is kind of odd, but it's because the legislature put it on and they've got to choose the number.
Okay.
But what we do, the reason the others are literally 26 through 31, what we do is we go up to 200, however many years it takes, and then we start over with the numbering. And we didn't used to do that. We used to have, like, start all over every election, and it became confusing. Like, if I talked about Prop 13, well, which one? Because, you know, so now we're only hitting 31, so, I mean, you could theoretically predict, since a November election is every other year, it could be quite a while before we hit 200, unless we end up with one of those years where there's like 20 of them all at one time, which does happen. So, and then, yeah, I don't think they would try again. The only other thing they could try is legal action. And there's your expert. You know, they could try, if the voters vote yes, and then, you know, the law goes into effect, I guess at that point they could try to find some weird loophole.
I'm confident that they're already drafting a complaint
Okay.
filed the day after the election if they feel it's needs to be.
Good point.
So.
There you go. You're a
And-
professor
and
of
if
law.
And if I were representing them, which of course I'm not, I'd argue restraint of trade.
Okay.
Um,
There's a fancy way of saying some kind of anti-competition kind
yeah,
of thing?
Yeah, or restraint of trade kind of argument, but I haven't thought about it till this moment, so there's
Yeah.
probably a better.
Yeah, but I think Professor is exactly right. They're already preparing to lose, right? And preparing litigation. And then that, of course, goes through a whole, and the only thing that I believe, and I'd have to double check, I admit it, I'm not totally confident, is if we vote yes by a majority, the law will go into effect, I think immediately, and then the litigation will drag out. It is a different situation unless they can get a restraining order.
Right, one of the things that this is one of the things that if I were representing them, I
Yeah.
would be trying to figure out what basis I could argue for a restraint.
Not letting it-
For a preliminary injunction
Yeah.
while the litigation is pending.
Yeah, an
So-
injunction meaning you can't enforce this law, because now we're in the courts. I feel like they tried that when the litigation first passed. The legislation. I feel like
I'm
they
sure
tried.
I didn't follow it, but I wouldn't be
Yeah,
surprised.
because that's frankly a little less expensive than a referendum. So they probably tried it, but we'll see what happens. I haven't seen polling. I don't know yet, what'll happen. None of us know, obviously. Now, why don't we take a look at 26 and 27, because these are the doozies. How many have already seen an ad, pro or con, referencing 26 or 27?
For months.
Everybody, right? Yeah, and that's your first clue. There's a lot of money behind this stuff. A lot of money on both sides. And I want to tell you, because, they're both on the ballot, and I'm going to give you kind of the really high-level, macro kind of approach. Both of these propositions are battles between a combination of different Indian tribes with different interests. Some of them are big casino owners, some don't have a casino, and they're all kind of splintered on both sides. The card rooms, which is like the Bicycle Club and I forget the names of some of
Commerce
them.
Casino, right?
Say it again?
Isn't the Commerce Casino a
The
card club?
Commerce Casino, which are like literally card rooms and gambling rooms for poker and things like that. And then there's the horse track people, they're in the mix. And then there's the out-of-state online gambling corporations. So there's this huge mix of special interests, all of whom have plenty of money to throw around. And that's why the ads started so early and will probably drive us all insane before Election Day. So why is everybody fighting? What are they fighting over? Well, they're fighting over different ways for people to gamble. So, for example, 26 is saying you can do sports betting, which has to, I guess people bet on like, will this college team win the game or will this professional team win? And by the way, in California, online sports betting is not legal. Many other states have legalized, and by the way, this whole thing happened because of a Supreme Court decision. I don't know the name of it, Camille, I don't know if you do, but within the last, not too many years, the Supreme Court decided that now that we all have these little devices, right, that we carry around, that we should be able to do online betting. Because I guess people used to do it kind of with their friends, or there were more sort of homegrown, old-fashioned ways of doing it. So some of the states immediately kind of legalized online sports betting, and California has not. So that's what some of this is about. So 26 basically says, you can bet on those teams if you're in one of our casinos. See? So certain tribes are very heavily spending on Prop 26 to get it because it would benefit their casinos, it would bring in new customers, right? And interestingly, the no side is some of the other tribes who don't have casinos or don't have whatever, maybe as successful a casino. I mean, they don't, not every California tribe has a casino, right? And the dollar figures between these two propositions, by the way, the pro and con totals, they think it will hit $500 million, 500 million in spending. Already there have been hundreds of millions spent on getting your vote one way or the other. And so the yes on 26, you'll see, you know, the tribal leader talking about how important it is to sustain their autonomy and to sustain their revenues. They need this sports betting in their casinos. And then on the other side, you'll probably see another tribal leader saying, you know, this doesn't benefit all of us, and, you know, whatever other argument. You might, on the no side, even though the money is coming from tribes, and also, but you might also on the no side, here's an ad, I don't know if it'll happen, but the funding will be from the horse racing community. They'll be on the yes side, pardon me. And the no side, you might see, believe it or not, one of the signers on the no side on Prop 26 is the, I don't know what you call, like it's an organization to protect horses who are used in racing. I imagine you've all heard, there have been some pretty bad scandals about horses getting sick and dying at Santa Anita. And there's only 4 horse race tracks left in California, apparently. And they would like this to happen, but the no side will say, you know, animal rights or animal protection, vote no. So there'll be a lot of competing kind of interests there. And then there's one other argument against both of these, which I think actually I'm starting to see in my junk mail. I've already gotten several mailers, and it's basically saying, you know, don't be fooled. And I think it's 27 they were talking about, not 27, but the point is they say, don't be fooled, anything that expands opportunities to gamble is going to increase addiction to gambling, leading to financial crises for individuals and their families, and a whole bunch of other kind of social problems. And that you'll see there in the no side on your sample ballot. It'll be very clear, you know, increasing gambling increases troubled gambling and addicted gambling. So there's kind of 26. Theoretically, it could bring some revenue to the state. It could cost money to regulate, you know, enforcement always costs public dollars for the most part. But we'll see what happens. And let's see, just for the record, no, I don't remember. I think that, I'm going to check the parties just real quick for fun, if you don't mind, very briefly. I have a photo. Okay, so the Republicans are opposing both of these, and the Democrats are neutral on 26 and no on 27. So, and I don't know what special interest involvement was there in those party decisions. Okay, so 27, now this one, talk about mega dollars. So this basically says, right here and now, pull out your phone, Rachel, go online and bet on, I don't know, your favorite basketball team or whatever, football, I don't know. And you can do it anywhere. Now, you can imagine who will benefit. Well, there's some big, big corporations that will make money off you if you do online sports betting. And so they are putting, again, the hundreds of millions of dollars, not just, of course, a few million to get it on the ballot, but to promote it. And basically it says, won't it be fun? Wherever you are, you can go and bet on your phone. And of course, here's another one of these kind of knockdown dragouts, because you've got some of the big tribes oppose it. Because after all, if you can do it anywhere, why would you make a trip to their casino, right? And of course, again, it's opposed by groups that are worried about addicted gambling, because it could potentially expand that group of people. And, you know, it has a sweetener. Prop 27, and this is one of these things we see a lot. Actually, it was in Prop 30 a little bit too, but we call the sweetener. So if you read the formal name of Prop 27, it's going to be something like, you know, a proposition to raise funds to, I mean, I'm joking, but save the world. It doesn't say save the world. It talks about homelessness, which of course we all are very concerned. And so it has the sweetener. It'll help, the money that'll be raised by all this online gambling that you do wherever you are, will help with homelessness issues. Now the ads I got in the mail, I should have brought one, it would have been fun, but it's, and I've heard them on the radio I think also, there's somebody there who says, I'm so-and-so, and I've spent my whole career working to solve homelessness, and I'm with such and such, you know, homelessness organization, and I'm against 27 because it really won't help, and it'll create more addiction of gamblers and so on. So you're going to see a lot of that kind of, again, the emotional appeals. And when you say who's paying for it, well, what's so much fun is, again, the Yes 27 is mostly, and I don't remember their names, I actually have a list somewhere, but it's all these corporations that are mostly not in California because they're not allowed to be here yet. They run online gambling. And I don't know if any of you would recognize, I remember one of them was called Dual Fan. FanDuel. Thank you. See, I need a lot of help here. And there's others like that whose names, for me, honestly, don't ring a bell. And then on the no side, you'll see, again, a lot of tribal money against it, and because it would undermine a source of business. I will say, this is just a fact about California voters. When there's so much pro and con advertising, we tend to get turned off. And we tend to say, you know, it's too complicated, I'm too confused, and we tend to vote no. Now we'll see. But that is often our reaction as voters, and it makes sense. The one thing I hope doesn't happen is that people say, I'm not going to vote at all because I'm so sick of all these ads, because that's a risk. And that's just one of the risks of direct democracy and the wide open, you know, no dollar cap. You spend whatever you want to promote your perspective. But I just hope it doesn't turn off voters. We have a couple options. We have about 5 minutes. We could see if there's any questions that I can answer, because I'm still learning about 26 and 27. Or I could quickly tell you about the County of LA measures, assuming we all live in LA County, and you will have those on your ballot. You want to do?
I would love to hear about the measures.
Okay. So the County of LA, both of the measures, one is called Measure A and one is called Measure C. And they were put there by the Board of Supervisors, which is 5 people, actually all women at the moment. So Measure A, here's the backstory. And by the way, I just want to mention tonight at 6 p.m., I forget, is it Fox TV, but KPCC radio and a bunch of streaming, we're going to have a debate. We're going to have 2 debates tonight that you can all watch. One is our 2 sheriff candidates, LA County Sheriff, and one is our mayoral for City of LA. And I mentioned the sheriffs because Prop A is kind of about the sheriff. And I'm sure you all know our current sheriff, who's been in office just 4 years, he's up for re-election, Alex Villanueva. He's very controversial for a number of reasons. I want to be careful on this campus because I know the sheriffs are your law enforcement on this campus. So we're not talking about the quality of any individual member of the department. He is controversial. And he's so controversial that the Board of Supervisors, by the way, he's elected as a separate person, like the district attorney, you know, the county tax assessor, and then the supervisors are elected from 5 districts, right, geographic chunks of the county. And in the past, the sheriff's kind of done it's always been a him, so I can say his job, someday a woman. And the county supervisors provide the budget for the sheriff's department and the county jail and all that. And, they've sort of worked out whatever the issues are. With Mr. Villanueva, Sheriff Villanueva, he has been rather combative with the supervisors. So what they did, by a 4-to-1 vote, this is interesting, 4 of them agreed and 1 didn't, they put on the ballot a measure which says that the supervisors, starting from now, if we say yes to Measure A, County Measure A, that they will have the right to discipline him. They will have the right to actually remove him. Now, they've never had the ability. It's been if we, the voters, wanted to recall the sheriff, and you may have heard there have been some campaigns, recall the sheriff, recall the district attorney, none of which made the ballot. But this would be very different, that the supervisor, now they made it a super majority. They said it would take 4 of the 5 to get rid of the sheriff. Now, the one who voted against it, I just want to mention some of her reasons, Supervisor Barger, she said, why just for the sheriff? If we're going to have a way that supervisors, by a supermajority, can remove another equally elected county official, why doesn't it say district attorney or assessor? And so she raised some, and she also raised the point that we're changing the sort of county constitution, if you want to call it the charter, for one situation, right? I mean, we have the sheriff that's been combative and controversial, and we're going to actually change the rules forever because of this situation. So she raises sort of the no side, and I believe she will be the signer on the opposition argument on your sample ballot. And on the yes side, you'll see the other 4 supervisors and I think a variety of other folks who are pretty frustrated about the sheriff and some of his actions. And of course, speaking of the debate tonight at 6, he is in a runoff tonight, or not tonight, in the election. The debate tonight is between Sheriff Villanueva and his opponent, challenger Robert Luna, who has been, I think, chief of police in Long Beach. Does that sound right? And so you can hear them debate tonight and help you, decide about that. And then the other and notice it's, again, county measure. If you don't live in LA County, you're not voting on that. And then Measure C, and all of a sudden I am telling you, I am drawing a blank on Measure C. I'm going to check real quick and see, because we're almost out of time. But really quickly, let me get to County C. Oh, I apologize, folks. I admit I am still learning along with all you. I will tell you, you are now among the most informed people in California, because Professor Camille had us do this well before most people are paying attention, and so I am still in my growth process. And I apologize, because I should know this, but it just kind of...
Yeah, but it's only 6 weeks to the election.
I know, my dear, but you know how it is. People don't pay attention. Although, again, with all the ads on 26 and 27, maybe people are starting to realize there's an election. But they may think that's the only thing on the ballot. I don't know. Okay, really quick. That's the city. I'm going to find Measure C, and I am so sorry. I'm very embarrassed about this. But and I can't search because I'm not online. I have to kind of...
Is it about police reform?
No, not the county. I'm sorry. There's this. Oh, wait. This. Let's see if I can bring up my PowerPoint here, which I didn't.
Oh,
bring
was that
today.
the marijuana tax?
Thank you. It's the. Thank you so much. It's for the what we call the unincorporated areas of the county. You know, the county of LA has 88 cities, and then it has some spaces where there's no city. Altadena is an unincorporated area. There's a bunch of them. This is so that the cannabis businesses, many of which are not legal, not under law, not paying taxes, that they can have legalized sales in the unincorporated. And again, the pro and con will be, we want it legal, we want people to pay taxes, the people who run the business, we want to be sure the cannabis is safe and has been kind of, checked by the government, whereas now there's all these illegal shops all over, everywhere, and that you don't know the quality or safety of those products. Thank you for that help. And again, you'll see that when you get your sample ballot from the state. Of course, it won't include county or city, but then you'll get a sample ballot through the county, and then those of us who live in LA City, we have 3 city measures. I don't know about, I believe the professor lives in Beverly Hills. I don't know how many you have.
I don't know. I'm waiting for that.
Waiting,
sample ballot.
it'll come. So I really want to thank you all. We're just about on time, and I thank you so much. Those of you who made time, and remember, you're now in the forefront. You can educate your friends and family. You know more than almost anybody, I think, in general, the basics. But thank you so much. Thank you to Professor Camille.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
I
I'm
want to
glad.
thank everybody for being here today.
Yeah.
Please
All.
feel free to take a snack and that sort of stuff. Maybe my tactic of early preparation was too ambitious, and I should wait.
You're
till
always very ambitious.
But thank you so much for
Thank
coming.
you
And
all.
of course, there are 2 remaining events for Independence Week. Tomorrow afternoon is the speech contest right here in this room. I don't know if we have, the entry deadline is today, and everybody always waits
Tell
till the
them
last
the
minute,
topic.
it's free speech online and offline. And kind of a thought about, inciting riots or not, as the case may be, or different kinds of thinking about those questions, right? So, we won't know till tonight if we have, entries and that sort of stuff, because it's been my experience that if it's due at 5, everybody submits at 4:55 or 5:05.
Is the presentation tomorrow? The actual debate?
It's not a debate, it's a
Or
speech contest,
speech,
so
excuse me.
each of the top speakers. And that's being sponsored by the Communication Studies Department. And then it's supposed to start about 1 here tomorrow. And then on Friday night, we're going to show the movie The Rainmaker right here in this room, and that's sponsored by the Law Department. And The Rainmaker is a movie based on a John Grisham book that's about everything lawyers shouldn't do and be slimy. But it's a great. I think it's a great movie. So anyway, and we'll have free snacks there too.
Yay.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much
Thank
for